Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My guest today is from Australia, Adele, not the singer.
Not the singer.
The other Adele. So you have a company called Crow with the Flow, and
That's right.
you are a designer and maker of amigurumi toys. So I got introduced to you through a few guys that you're good friends with, Drew and Zach. So how did you meet them? Let's talk about the community, the TikTok community and the Instagram community, and how you guys met.
So TikTok is really where I first was introduced to particularly Zach and Drew. I just started TikTok for something fun to do. I really enjoyed kind of all of the fun little videos and things that just are so irreverent and you don't think too hard about them. And then these guys kind of just came across my path, and I guess the community element of TikTok was something I was absolutely not expecting. It's not something I went in there. I was kind of like, oh, TikTok, another platform, something fun, but also, a bit of marketing and things like that for my business. And then this amazing, group of people were just so supportive, and, that's kicked off a lot of conversations. And now, I'm very much friends with a lot of people that I have met on TikTok in particular, in a way that Instagram I felt was quite different. And yeah, so that's kind of where I got to meet them. And now, Drew and I communicate almost on a daily basis, and Zach lives in the town that I live in now. And so we're actually catching up tonight and we've just become like very fast friends. And they're absolutely my friends that I've met online and that help me out with a variety of different things. And yeah, the community spirit is amazing.
Well, when I was interviewing Zach, his main complaint about you was that because you're the local, right, you have the absolute right to all the Australian animals, and he feels awkward crocheting them because this is your turf. And he's like, I'm concentrating on New Zealand animals, but now I'm in Australia and they're so beautiful, but Adele covered the market.
I don't know that I could ever cover the entire Australian animal market, but that's very sweet of him.
I mean, do you feel like it's a competition? Do you feel like like you get inspired by them, like you get ideas from them? How does it work with the colleagues?
I don't feel intimidated by them at all. I don't feel a sense of competition with them. I think there's every single day I learn things from them. I get ideas from them. I mean, I don't think I've ever told him about this, but the eyes that I do on my amigurumi, I actually got the idea from Drew because I probably should have told him this beforehand, but that's fine. I'll tell him after. He always talked a lot about using felt eyes and how he was more comfortable using felt eyes because, if kids are playing with toys, then having something softer is generally, a little bit better. And I was like, that's great. But I find felt really fiddly to work with. It's not my favorite. And then it's not kind of in keeping with the crochet element of what I do. So I was like, what can I do here? And I know that there's been different people. There is different people and amazing artists who do different eyes. But I was like, how can I put my own spin on this? And what can I do here? So he definitely inspired me on that. And now, people constantly ask me about the eyes on my toys. And I think it makes my work quite recognizable because this is what I do. So it's definitely an inspiration thing and not a competition thing. And I'm really happy with that. Like the competition, I don't know, I guess healthy competition is good, but I appreciate the community so much more. I can get competition from other places. I don't need it from a crochet standpoint.
Well, when I looked at your TikToks, so there are some like silly videos where you're basically making fun of your everyday life and like how you communicate with your spouse and like the kids and everything. And then there are instructional videos where you actually give tips of how to like connect the colors so it's not visible, or how to
Mhm.
make the eyes look more realistic and all that stuff. Do you, when you plan your next TikTok video, are you strategic about it, or is it like always an inspiration of the day?
I want to say that I like plan it all out and I set my whole months, and you know, I really know what I'm going to do, and that is 100% my goal, but it's not like that at all. It's very just ad hoc. It's very, what do I feel like doing? I mean, sometimes I do think I haven't done an instructional video for a while. I should do an instructional video. But it's not as strategic as I would like it to be. It is often, especially with TikTok, you know, I do get on there and have a real look at, you know, what's trending, what's happening. And with a lot of those things, you kind of have to jump on them relatively quickly, or I think that you've got to jump on them relatively quickly to kind of maximize how they go. So especially like the funny ones, whereas the planned instructional stuff is a little bit more, you can kind of, you know, make that happen whenever you want to make that happen. But I find, you know, TikTok, everything moves so fast, so you do have to kind of jump on things as and when they happen, which turns it into this like just, you know, a little bit more reactionary, I suppose, and a little bit less well planned.
Well, I mean, do you look at does TikTok ever stress you out? Like the fact that you have to constantly come up with the new ideas and see what's trending and when you're going to post and what you're going to post?
No, because I really enjoy getting on there. Unlike Instagram, with TikTok, I have laughed so hard every single time I open the app. It makes me laugh. So I don't find that stressful. I find it hugely enjoyable, to the point it probably impacts on things just a little bit too much. I'm on there probably more than I should be. But no, I think it's because I get so much enjoyment out of it. Yeah, I'm just enjoying myself too much to kind of get stressed out by it. And I really enjoy making the videos. I think it is so much fun. I've become more and more comfortable in front of the camera as a result of doing it more and more. And I think, you know, for people who are watching who are like, oh, but I don't want to get in front of the camera and I don't want to do this. It's, you know, you start out maybe just showing your hands and doing something and talking over things, and then you can kind of progress to, you know, showing your face a little bit more and doing things that way. And you know, to start off with, for me, I kind of thought that I wouldn't be able to kind of get in front of the camera, and now I'm super comfortable and I do lives and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back a little bit. So were you always very artistic? Did you see yourself as an artistic person?
Not at all. Not at all. So I previously worked in a very corporate environment. It was very kind of regulations and rules and processes, and it was very much about risk management. And it was about 10 years ago, I went on maternity leave for the first time, having my first child, and I just really needed some creative expression. And so I thought, I don't know why, I thought I want to learn to crochet, but it just popped into my head, I want to learn to crochet. So I started on, you know, looking at YouTube tutorials and things like that. And then it kind of progressed from there, and I found the more I was crocheting, the more choices I was making that were creative choices, the more creative I felt. You know, in this corporate environment that I worked in, I felt like I was so restricted that I just had to constantly kind of, you know, these are the rules, this is what I have to do, follow the process. And when my manager would ask me to be innovative in any way, I just couldn't even do that. So then building in this kind of crochet expression, this creativity, it just kind of grew and grew to the point where I couldn't kind of ignore it anymore. And what, you know, started out as following someone else's pattern turned into creating my own patterns. So now I'm constantly like coming up with ideas and thinking of things, waking myself up in the middle of the night, thinking about yarn choices and how I can put together a particular shape or animal or, you know, some other type of creation, and the creativity never stops. And for me, going from that 10 years ago, a person that just never thought I could be creative at all, to me now not being able to stop the creativity. It's just like polar opposites.
So like do you remember that moment when you like realized that you're an artist, that you're a Farbe artist?
Yeah, probably a couple of, I don't know that there was a particular moment, but I think when I started, so this cockatoo, not exactly in this yarn, but making this cockatoo design a couple of years ago was probably when I very first thought, oh, I am actually an artist. It's not just following the process, but a process that somebody else kind of set out. But I suppose if I think back on it now, even before that, when I was making colour choices or making slight tweaks and changes to other people's patterns, even then I was an artist. So yeah, I think you kind of gradually come to that. And I don't know that I was always comfortable saying that, because I'm like, it's a hobby, it's not really art, but I feel like now it is art. It is absolutely art.
Right. Well, what was your first pattern that you published?
The first pattern that I published was the cockatoo, and it was only last year. It's been relatively recently, because I would just make the finished product and sell the finished product. And it took me ages to build up the confidence to write the pattern. And Zach and Drew were really kind of helpful in that process. They tested the pattern for me. They were amazingly supportive. But yeah, it was only last year that I published the pattern for the first time.
Was it difficult for you to decide like how to write the pattern, like what to include, how much to include, how much information to put there? Because especially like when it comes to finishes, like I find some patterns are like bare minimum, right? Like attach the eyes on the row 7, and others go into whole detail of eyelashes and what have you, and shading and all that. How do you decide when to stop?
That is a really tough question. I do tend to be a more is more kind of person. So for me, it's more about, okay, what do I pull out? And some of the things I even, to start off with, put in the pattern, my testers were like, oh, I think this complicates things. So they were very much pivotal in helping me decide what to keep in and what to kind of take out or tweak slightly. I think I had a fair sense of how I wanted the patterns to look visually. I definitely wanted lots of photographs. I wanted like the design wise it to look a particular way, but yeah, it's always that kind of teething, like what do you keep in, what do you take out, because it makes it too complicated, because you don't want someone to pull out a pattern and be like overwhelmed with too much information, but equally you want to be able to say, like, this is my patterns aren't like basic patterns, they're probably more intermediate type patterns, especially with the eyes. So I feel like more information is a good thing.
Right. So when you do the tutorials, who is your audience? Like, who do you have in mind for those tutorials? Are you talking to like complete beginners? Are you talking to people who make your patterns?
A little combination of both. So I do think about, when I was starting out with crochet, what were the kind of teething issues and questions that I had as I was kind of going through it. Sometimes it is to people who have bought the pattern, and when I sew on the eyes, for example, this is like the actual process of how I do it to make it look, the circles stay round and things like that. It's really a combination. I wish I had a more tactical approach to my tutorials and things, but it's kind of a bit scattergun. It's a bit more just like, as I think of them, oh, this is a cool thing. Or, again, with bouncing ideas off the community, like Drew and Zach as an example, sometimes I'll include something in the pattern and they'll be like, this is, that I think is quite basic. And they'll be like, this is something new, this is something different that we didn't know about. And so I think, okay, well, other people would benefit from this, so I'll do a tutorial about it. So it's just as it comes up.
So, I mean, you live in a place where the amount of animals is just endless, I feel like. I mean, you can have like all kinds of mammals and birds and what have you, like spiders. Some of those spiders like really, really interesting looking.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide what you're gonna make? What kind of animals call your name? Do you like, are you on a mission to cover the entire Australian fauna and fauna?
I don't think I could. There are far too many. And the thing with Australian animals is that with a vast proportion of them, they're not found anywhere else in the world. So that's what makes them particularly unique and interesting. I have definitely found myself leaning heavily into the bird making. And I think primarily that was because the birds in Australia are such fantastic and amazing colours. So bright. I'm always drawn to bright colours, unsurprisingly. But yeah, the bright colours definitely, you know, pique my interest. And so often it's about what animals have those bright colours and how can I recreate them in yarn form. So definitely birds for me. And I found that as I'm making birds, I'm watching out for birds more in nature as well. So it's kind of, it works both ways. But I'm really interested in doing spiders. I'm really interested in doing reptiles and things like that. But for me, it's always about, you know, what is visually interesting and ideally what has like bright colours. So things like, you know, something that just comes to mind is I would really love to make, there's these animals called blue-ringed octopuses. They are one of the most venomous creatures in Australia, which in the list of Australian animals is pretty long. But they're like, they've got these really brightly coloured blue rings on them, and I'm like, how can I recreate that again in yarn form? That sort of, it's often about the colour for me.
Well, when you see an animal in nature or anywhere, right? Like, are you immediately taking picture of it? Do you sketch them? How does the design work of like the new animal that you create?
It's picked, I mean, sometimes I don't have access to the animal necessarily in nature. Not all of Australian animals are across all of Australia or in the particular area of Australia that I live in, Melbourne. But if I see it in nature, I'm absolutely trying to take pictures, and it's Google searching, and I do a little bit of sketching, but not a huge amount. Like initially, if I'm starting a design, I'll maybe make a sketch of what I want it to look like. And because there are so many Australian animals that I could kind of potentially create, it has to kind of form some sort of a shape in my mind, and I probably can't describe it any better than that. Like I need to know what the shape of the creation is I'm going to look at or I'm going to make. So a lot of people kind of throw ideas at me as, you know, you're online and people are like, make this, make this, make this. And I'm like, unless I've got an idea in my head of what I want it to look like, I won't like push it. I won't force it. Like I must make a whatever. If it's not forming in my mind, I'll be like, all right, I'll shelve that idea. I'll come back to something else. And then it's just about trial and error for me with the yarn and just like making shapes, and sometimes things come together super, super quickly. And other times, like the echidna that I've got up here, this took at least a year. I was like, I want to make an echidna, and then it started, the yarn wasn't kind of bending in the way that I wanted it to, so I kind of put it aside, and then I came back to it. And I mean, I think that's come out pretty cute. It's very detailed, but it just took me a while to get there. So I'm not I will work on this until it kind of completes. I'm like working on a million different whips at a time. So,
right. Well, at what point did you decide that it's time to turn it into a business and start selling the finished items?
I think people around me, like my family and friends, were asking me to create these things for them. And so that really kicked things off for me in making the finished products. It was really just, and a little bit from online, but mostly family and friends asking for things. And I was like, okay, I think I can start to, you know, make a little bit of money from this as well.
Is it difficult to ask for money for what people consider a hobby?
It is, and especially because like you and I know how long these things take to make,
Right.
and people out in the world don't necessarily have that understanding. And I'm still kind of working out how do we help people to understand what, like, how much time and effort and love goes into these things. I mean, I don't know that anyone's kind of perfected that, but yeah, it is hard to ask for sure. And to start off with, I probably didn't. And, you know, for my mum or someone like that, I'm just gonna be like, here it is, or my, you know, best friend, here's something you can give to somebody else. But that definitely takes practice.
Your kids try to play with every toy you make?
Absolutely. All the time. Although they're getting better at it, they're getting a little bit older now, but usually, especially if I'm kind of working up something that I do a few different iterations of, my kids end up with the kind of wonky looking ones. Which sounds a bit terrible, but they're like, you know, my daughter has a couple of heads of different animals sitting on her bed, because, you know, sometimes I don't end up frogging things, and so she ends up, well, my son ends up with different wonky kind of shaped animals that I'm not 100% comfortable sending out into the world, but I'm not like going to take the time to frog it, so they get those ones. So that tends to like keep them at bay a little bit. But it's funny when you see other kids come into their house and they're like, all of the toys, and my kids are like, meh.
Well, do you get tired of making the same things? Like, do you always want to make something new, but like there's an order and you have to work on the order? Like, do you have that issue?
Not so much, because often, even if it's, you know, I've made so many cockatoos, but often they're in different colors, so that just keeps me interested. I did so I was also making custom dogs for different people, and I've kind of eased off that a little bit, because that was it was very intense to kind of go, okay, someone's pride and joy, and it takes a huge amount of time to kind of come up with, okay, what yarn am I going to use, what shapes will I do? Everything is different all of the time, and so I've kind of like edged away from that a little bit. I still plan to do a couple of customs here and there for those sorts of things, but I've definitely kind of moved more towards the Australian animals. So there's always something interesting and different, and I just love working with yarn so much. It just like, it calms me down. I love it. So
like, majority of your toys are pretty large. Do you ever get problem with your hands working with like heavy toys?
I mean, I do a little bit of the cotton, like the top two ones that you can see here. I do a little bit of cotton work. The only time I tend to have any sort of soreness is around Christmas time, which I'm sure a lot of makers can kind of relate to. That's when I work myself too hard. But I think because I'm doing it so often, like I've got all the muscles, the fine motor kind of muscles going in my wrists and hands and arms. And so, no, and I do like to stay fit. I do a lot of running. I do a bunch of weights, and some of them specifically designed to kind of counteract the like hunched over and like things. So I have put in place quite a few things to try and kind of balance myself out. So
do you have hard time stopping, and like, do you have the same like the knitters one more row kind of symptom?
absolutely. My husband's constantly going to bed, and I'm like, I'm just going to finish this round, and you know, 10 rounds later, still going. And I think that's a function of really loving what I do.
Talking about your husband, how is he reacting? Like, there you were in a corporate position with you know, the income that could be counted on, going into the arts and total unpredictability of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna talk about the stash as well, but like, let's start with that. Like, what's his reaction?
I mean, he's always been amazingly supportive of all of this. You know, because it kind of started when I was on maternity leave, we had some counters around, like we had I had time off anyway. So that worked really well. And I guess just the way life has worked for us has meant that like it initially increased kind of as I was balancing the corporate stuff. And I still do a little bit of consulting here and there from a corporate point of view, but not a huge amount anymore. And it's just kind of worked that his, work stuff his responsibilities at work and things like that have increased as I've taken over more of this like art type of focus. So, I guess I'm very privileged in that way. And he's just always like, we have obviously conversations about what this looks like for us as a family. It enables a lot of flexibility from me and looking after the kids. And obviously with all of the pandemic and all of that, in Australia and in Melbourne, we had lots of lockdowns and lots of homeschooling for the last 2 years. So, I've taken the bulk of that responsibility. And so from a balance perspective as a family, it has just worked for us. And so he's extremely supportive in that way.
How about your personal stash? So because it's a business, you need to have all these colors, and it's a big chunky yarn that you use, and the stuffing and the eyes, and I'm sure it's like there's another million things that I can't even think about. How do you keep it organized? How do you keep it from kids playing with it, husband complaining about it, it taking over the house and all that stuff?
You assume that there is organization and that I don't take over the house, but I do. My kids are really good with not playing with it. They know that this is mum stuff and that they don't touch it. Again, with all of, working from home and homeschooling and things like that, for the last 2 years, I've been moved around from place to place in our house. So, there was yarn and toys and things all over the house at various points through the last 2 years. At the moment, I've got a space and I don't know that there's much organisation. I don't know that, I do try and make a very conscious effort to kind of keep a close eye on, okay, well, if I'm making money here, then I can spend money there from a yarn stash perspective, because otherwise I would be at the yarn store every second day and I would be placing online orders every second day. But I am, I'm quite conscious of that. So
when you come to yarn store, do you go with like exact plan of what you're gonna buy, or do you walk into the yarn store and you're like, oh my god, I need all of these colors, 2 of each? Like, how does it work for you?
So it really depends on the projects that I have coming up or that I'm making. The thing with buying yarn in Australia is that our choices can be quite limited in some ways, and so there is a lot of online buying that needs to happen as well, which is, I find, really difficult in some ways, because you want to touch it, you want to squish it, you want to like feel and see the weight and all of those sorts of things. So from an online perspective, sometimes it is a little bit more, and that kind of, for me, I don't want to buy a bunch of yarn that I then get delivered and go, this is not right. That for me would be really stressful, like having spent a lot of money and then not be able to use something. Whereas if I go into the store, oftentimes it is, okay, what's available, what colours are available, and then thinking in the store, okay, what toy or what thing am I going to make out of these colours that are available, because sometimes the colours are extremely limited. The other thing is, like, so using this one as an example, this is a design that I've made countless times in kind of more traditional cockatoo colours, but then at our kind of big box yarn store, they have, they don't have chunky yarns, and I've kind of, moved towards doing that sort of thing. They do have bulkier yarns that I've then double stranded and combined to create this kind of look. So sometimes it's about what's available, how can I then tweak that and use that in my designs. So sometimes it's going in there and saying, I'll just, you know, grab the things that I need. And sometimes it is, how can I use this within my own parameters?
Well, now that you'd start designing the patterns, where do you see yourself going more? Like, do you see yourself still concentrating on making actual toys, or do you see yourself trying to push the design side of the business?
I think definitely the design side of the business. I would also, I really am looking at doing some in-person classes as well with kids and adults and different sorts of things there. I haven't done that in the past. So, you know, using my patterns or using things that I design within those spaces. I still really enjoy the finished product types of thing, and then, you know, sharing them with people and sending them out and seeing their faces and seeing how they are enjoying the things that I've physically made. I still really enjoy that, but I think it will probably balance out to be much more of the design side of things. And, you know, maybe ideally kits with my patterns as well as the yarns that I use, because I do kind of like, I'll use the yarns from, you know, this place as well as this place. So, you know, being able to have them all together in one kit, I think could be potentially quite helpful, especially in Australia, because we do have some difficulty getting the variety.
Well, when you make new toy, right? When it comes to the business side of it, you can make something that's gonna look pretty, but it's like super simple to make. Or you can spend countless hours making something that pleases you, but it's not gonna necessarily sell because it's just like you can't charge that much money for a toy, right? How do you decide that balance?
I think it's weird. So, you know, using this as an example with a echidna, I didn't even really consider that when I made it. Because I was just like, I really want to make an echidna. I made this design, and then as I was putting it together, I realized just how much time it was going to take somebody to make. And so I've only sold, like, finished product wise, a couple of these, because again, you know, it's a toy. People don't want to spend a ridiculous amount on them. So I think for something like that, then I'm like, okay, it's pattern as opposed to finished product as kind of the focus. So I think it just depends on where my head's at in terms of what I am creating. I do tend to go more on the kind of more detail, more involvement, and just say, oh, well, that's the way it is, which I'm learning, but slowly, to not do that.
How many projects do you work on at the same time?
I don't know that I can answer that. It's too many. I need to get more organized with it. It's a lot. I do have a lot of things on the go. I'm not a finished and next at all. 10.
Well, how do you decide what you're going to work on at any particular moment then?
I do have a plan for, like, okay, you know, for the year, here's where I want, you know, this is what I'm thinking in terms of what I'll design for the year. Here's where I think I'll do store restocks. So there is like a loose plan, but oftentimes it is like, that's purely just like decided by me. So I can be quite flexible, and I do actually really enjoy that now, because, you know, I'm almost like, it's like I'm rebelling against that kind of really structured side of things to now be just like free and easy and however I want to be. So it's just what I feel like making, or what yarn I have available at that particular moment in time. So yeah.
So now instead of working 9 to 5, you just worked like 17 hours a day and you enjoyed the rebellion.
Pretty much what it is. This conversation is very much making me think, no, I need to be more structured in what I do, but I'm just not.
Well, whatever works, right? Like whatever works for you.
That's right. Yeah.
How difficult for you to concentrate on marketing side of it, because you're like one woman show, so you have your patterns that you write, you have to keep an eye on the testers as they test it, you making the toys, you shipping the toys, and then there is marketing. Like how do you manage all of that?
I have also joined a group that's run by an Australian woman called Grammatical Club. So they are very much focused on and giving ideas and suggestions and thoughts, and just a lot of information about marketing and how, you know, just some different ideas about the way to do that. So that's been extremely helpful for me. I think, again, it's a constant evolution, you know, like learning to take decent photos and constantly being on top of that. Like, okay, so I have to post some things, I have to talk about this, I have to talk about that. I don't know that I've got it 100% right 100% of the time, but what I do know is I look back on the stuff that I was doing, you know, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years ago, and think, all right, well, my photos are getting better, my, you know, content is getting better, I'm working on this. So, you know, I'm constantly kind of honing that.
Well, do you feel like you're living your dream right now? Like, do you see it as a beginning of your journey, like middle way? Like, where are you?
I'm only just starting. I've only just really started putting out my patterns last year. So I feel like I've got so much more that I want to achieve. I've got so many more ideas of things. Ideas is definitely not the problem. For me, it's just about time and just getting, you know, and I feel like I could be doing this until I'm old and have grandkids running around, and like, what's stopping that? So it's very much beginning for me.
Do you ever get days when you don't crochet?
Rarely. Usually only if I'm kind of, if we go camping as a family or something like that, those will be the days when I'm not crocheting. But if I'm at home, every day.
I mean, are there like any days when you like don't have any creative inspirations, like you have the artist block sort of?
Yes, but like I said, I've kind of, because I've got this list of different animals specifically, and the animals are constantly inspiring for me. I never have a block on what I want to make. It's more just like, this shape isn't working in the way that I wanted it to work. That's the sort of block that I tend to get. So, I mean, yes, and that's when I, you know, throw that project in the corner and then like move on to something else. Again, like maybe it's something that, you know, I've made 15,000 times and that I can just kind of mindlessly make, and I find that can be quite a, like it just soothes the other stuff.
Are you ever surprised by success of something that you make, or like think something is going to be super successful and crickets?
Yes. Yes. All the time. I actually made a video about this yesterday. So I made a video about actually this one, the fairy bread. Can't see it very well in the video, but I made this giant kind of plushy fairy bread, which is an Australian snack, and it sat in my store for months and months and months and months and months, and I was just like, okay, well, I'm never going to sell this, it's just going to sit in my store. And I thought it was really cute, and I thought it was quite funny, and so until I made this video, it sat there, and then, you know, 20 minutes after I made the video, it sold. So that was like, ooh, marketing, well done. And then, yeah, other things that I've kind of just been like, oh, I'll use the same shape of this, but I'll do it in different colors, has really resonated. So like this cockatiel, people love cockatiels. People are very excited about cockatiels because I guess like it is an Australian animal. They're found in the wild in Australia, but lots of people have them as pets. So because lots of people have them as pets, they have that kind of heart connection with them. So they love the cockatiels. So that took me by surprise a little bit.
Do you feel like you already created your masterpiece, like something you're superbly proud of, or do you think it's still ahead of you?
oh, I definitely think it's still ahead of me. And I think that's always the way you've got to think, to kind of keep you pushing and keep you interested in things. And I'm really proud of the things that I've created so far, but there's always the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
When you look back at some of the first toys you make, do you see the mistakes? Do you see like the creativity of it? Are you critically looking at it? Is it?
For sure. Yeah. I definitely look back and just go, oh. But also that's lots of fun as well to see. I mean, even when you look back, even it's not something that you designed, but that you made, and then you look back and go, I mean, I've got something here. This is not what I designed, but like the first amigurumi that I made, it's like, it's so holy and you can see all of the stuffing, but I keep it because I want to be reminded of how far I've come. I totally look at this and just go, oh, it's so soft, whereas I stuff things really hard now. And yeah, you can see everything. It's the, you know, from a skill level perspective, it's terrible, but you know, to be able to see how far I've come is a really cool thing. And I think if people, when they're starting out, they're like, oh, this is horrible, keep that thing, I think is really important. Keep that thing so you can look back and go, wow, I've progressed so far. Because a lot of the time, you know, a lot of interactions I have with people who are just starting out, they'll say, oh, I can't do this. Oh, I'll never be that good. I'll never have those skills. And I'm like, well, I started off learning from YouTube and this is my first thing. So it's just about kind of repetition and practice and testing and trying and learning constantly. And I think that's the thing I absolutely love most of all about doing this. You know, you can never say, all right, that's it. I've learned everything and I'm done. I am the master. You just can't. There's always something new to learn.
Right. I mean, when you look at your creations all around you, do you see, like, you imagine like opening a huge store and just filling it up with toys? Like, do you ever get an idea of like where you want to take it physically somewhere?
I don't see a store being something that I want to do.
How about the book? How about the book on Australian animals?
I would love to do a book on Australian animals. That would be amazing. I actually used to work for a book publisher, not actually publishing books, but, you know, from behind the scenes perspective. And it was a job that I adored. And so, I mean, making a book would definitely be a dream for sure.
Do you teach your kids how to crochet?
I've tried. Not very successfully. And I think because I was more invested in it than they were. I was trying to, at some point during one of the lockdowns in Melbourne, I was like, this is a good project, let's do that. I feel like teaching other people's kids is slightly more, yeah, they're going to learn better than my kids are interested in learning from me.
You ever get frustrated with like the algorithms of TikTok or Instagram and feel like you already been doing it for a while and you figured it out, and then next day something new comes up and you're back to square one?
And again, with that thing of something that you think is really funny or really like cool and you put a lot of time into it, that's not generally the thing that does really well, and that can be a bit frustrating sometimes. It's usually the thing that you just kind of randomly think about and just go, oh, I'll make this super quick video. They're often the things that go bananas, which can be really frustrating, especially for someone who's kind of first starting out, that, you know, it's not the thing that takes the most time and effort. It is those things that are just those random, like flippant, whatever. It can be a bit frustrating for sure. But I think what I try and remind myself is just like, okay, well, this is just practice, and it all kind of builds up. You don't get, you know, better unless you keep practicing it. So it's just kind of practice is what I try and tell myself when I am getting frustrated.
Well, if somebody came to you today and said, well, I like crocheting, I like making amigurumis, and I'm thinking of quitting my corporate job and going full-time into that, like, what would be your advice to them?
I think my advice would be start it while you're doing your corporate job, to like, so that you can get a sense of, okay, well, what does it take? What does it involve? What, you know, what can you make from it? At the same time, if you know, if you're able to do that, because I guess some people are not. And I think the thing that I really believe is that you've got to be having fun while you're doing it. So, because I think the fun translates across, you know, to whoever might be buying what you're making, what you're creating. I feel like that's why TikTok has worked for me so far, because I've just really gone, let's just have fun with this. Let's not take it too seriously. Let's just kind of see how things go. And that seems to have worked so far. I feel like people kind of connect with that sense of fun. So as long as you're enjoying it, that's kind of the key thing. And I think sometimes if people are like, well, I'm quitting my job, I'm just going to focus on this, it becomes really stressful really, really quickly. So,
you know, my favorite TikTok of yours, when you were like, let me show you the Australian wild countryside, and you're going through some like jungly looking places, and then there are your toys there, 5 birds sitting on some tree trunk.
Yeah, keep it. I mean, that was a bit kind of like Steve Irwin-ish, right? I was trying to do a bit of that sort of things. And again, it's just about, you know, just making light and fun of things. I try not to take things too seriously if I can, because I've done that part of my life. I've done the corporate like rules person. I kind of like to keep things fun now.
Is there anything like that you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I knew that when I started? Like, is there any regrets that you started, that you went into that, or anything you wish you've done better?
I think for me, with the pattern writing, I think everyone who writes a pattern for the first time does this with their first pattern. You overthink everything. It takes way longer than it should. I really wish I had just kind of gone, I really enjoy doing this. I love making them. I think they're cute. I'm just going to put it out there. I wish I hadn't have taken as long as I did, because, you know, the second that I did it, it was like, okay, I need to do more of this.
So what are you working on right now? Like, what's in the works? What can the viewers expect to see on your account coming up?
Absolutely. It's all going to be about patterns. So I am hopefully going to have a wombat pattern out soon. So wombats are just like these big kind of, like, they've got really big bums and are just really kind of chunky, very cute animals. So there's definitely a wombat pattern coming out. It will mostly be about patterns. So it's more for me just like, okay, but which one? Because oftentimes I've made the finished product and sold the finished product, and now it's just about turning that into a pattern that other people can understand and read. So I just have to make decisions about the next kind of few, but it will definitely be, yeah, the patterns. And then also, you know, making decisions about, okay, so which brightly coloured Australian animal am I going to, you know, create new designs for? So it's probably going to be some sort of bright bird, but also maybe some reptiles, maybe.
Can't wait to see what you're going to create. I'll definitely be watching you on TikTok and on Instagram and having fun seeing your creations.
Thank you. I hope it brings you laughter and joy when you see my stuff. That's the aim.
Well, thank you so much, Adele, for being my guest today. I really enjoyed talking to you on my channel.
Thank you so much for having me, Irina. I really appreciate it. It was lots of fun chatting.
Thank you.